Today, I wanted to talk about the shadow self because I was being narcissistic and I was looking back at my old podcast episodes, like what I've talked about, what I've already done episodes on, so I don't do the same fucking thing twice because I would not put it past myself. And I did an episode, I think it was called Learning to Be Your Full and Authentic Self in Your 20s. And that was like one of the most watched episodes that I've done. And I thought that episode probably resonated because we all have a shadow self. And that's what that episode was really about, where we feel like we have this guilt and this shame like wrapped around parts of our personality and parts of who we are and how we feel because we've learned that there's something wrong with it or someone's made us feel bad for it. Reevaluating where you've got these thoughts from about yourself and why you've got this guilt around certain parts of yourself, and is it because you don't like that part or is it because someone's made you feel bad about it, and maybe actually that's a part of yourself that you quite like and that you don't need to feel so ashamed of. That is when a part of you is in your shadow self. It's the parts of who we are in our personality that we feel like make us bad people. That's like, in a nutshell, I feel like that's my take on the shadow self. So yeah, today I thought I would do an episode specifically on 3 or 4 ways that I think you can discover what your shadow self is, what's going on back there, what's going on in your subconscious, what parts of you are you even suppressing, what parts do you feel guilty about? Maybe you've felt so bad about them for so long, you've like shoved them so far back that you don't even know what they are, So the first step to all of this is to figure out what's going on. I think the issue with not doing this is when something's in your shadow self, right? Something you don't like about yourself, something that triggers you a bit. As long as that stays there, you're going to keep getting triggered by it. It's going to keep putting you in these like self-sabotaging cycles. You're going to end up in the same situations. You're going to be having the same kinds of arguments and getting upset by the same kinds of things because that's what happens. It's like it will be this thing that has a kind of hold over you and keeps you kind of stuck until you start to work through it. Anyway, let's get into the few things that I've written down. A few ways that I think can help you identify what your weak spots are. Okay, I'm gonna start with one of the most like this is a very big identifier to your weak spots, your kind of, I guess you could kind of call it an insecurity. It is one, really, a part of you that you feel guilty about, a part that if someone hits that nerve, it fucking hurts. And you will act out, inevitably, you will act out. You will be more likely to say shit that you don't mean because you're just like, oh my God, they're putting like a spotlight on that fucking part that I'm trying so hard to deny. Like, it's not fun. So the first one that I wrote down is, what conclusions do you jump to when you're feeling triggered or you're in an argument? Where does your brain, as a reflex, go? Because generally, we all have 1 or 2 particular areas that if we're in an argument, we're in a conflict, we all have in our minds certain places that we assume that's what they're saying. Do you know what I mean? We jump to a conclusion. And again, this is the ego coming into play because it's kind of like a feeling of, you feel like you've been caught out or like called out. Where if someone is maybe criticizing you or saying that you haven't done something very well, or it's just some sort of, it doesn't even have to be an argument, just some sort of conversation maybe with your partner, is quite often with your partner, is, say someone comes to you with like something that they didn't like that you've done or something. Quite often our brains, whatever the fuck they're even talking about, it could be nothing to do with this, your brain will default to thinking that it's the part of you that you are ashamed of. Does this make sense? Because of the nature of the shadow self, it's something you feel ashamed of and you're trying to hide. You're trying to pretend isn't there. So when someone is like, I don't like this thing that you've done or said, we think, oh my God, they've seen the thing that I'm trying to fucking hide. You see what I mean? I think that's why it triggers us, why it hits a nerve in us when someone critiques us or there's an argument or some sort of triggering going on for you. You're immediately, a lot of the time, gonna jump to the part of you that you're trying to deny. You think, oh my God, they've seen that, they're calling me out, they think it's this, they think it's that, when they might not even be fucking talking about that. They probably aren't. This is one of the main reasons why I think it's so important to try and kind of work out what these things are for you and heal them a little bit. is because it's not going to go anywhere and you're just going to keep getting triggered by it and keep being kind of mean towards yourself when it's not necessary. Do you know what I mean? We all have weak spots. We all have parts of us that we're not proud of. And I think the longer that you deny that, the longer it's just sitting there, and it's just going to be the thing that you end up like being really hard on yourself about all the time. You know, it's the thing that, like I said, in an argument or something, that you'll ruminate about, or you'll have these repetitive thoughts about, and you'll think, oh, it's because of this and it's because of this, and the area that maybe you think you're not good enough in, or you think that is fundamentally wrong with you. And half the time, this is shit people have told us. This is the annoying thing. It's some sort of like trauma where someone's told you something that's really hurt you, and then you've like really absorbed it and taken it in as like, oh, they're right, this is something about me that's like wrong, when sometimes, this is again why it's worth thinking about, sometimes they weren't right. Sometimes it's like you've got this part of yourself that you're being really mean to yourself about, and you're always jumping to like, oh, this person doesn't, they've seen it and they don't like it, when half the time there's nothing wrong with it. You've just taken someone's words and absorbed them without really thinking whether you agree or not. But yeah, this is one that's huge that I think will very quickly highlight what's going on in your shadow self, is have an argument with your partner. Where does your brain go? What do you think that they're calling you out for? What do you think is like something that, maybe this is just me, I hope not, but I feel like everyone has a couple of things that they feel like are kind of hard to love about them. And we feel like our partners and things, like they're dating us and it's all great, but there's like this thing that until they find out this thing, and then like it's going to be ruined, or like they're not going to want to be with me. I feel like we all have some sort of area like that we feel kind of embarrassed of, or we feel like we actively make an effort to not let people see. And I think it's just so freeing to realize that, like I said, we all have weak spots and we all have flaws and we all have things that are difficult to deal with. None of us are like, oh, just a really smooth ride. We're all fucking complicated. So that's one of them. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one takes a little bit more thought. That one's very immediate. I think you very quickly will work out what's going on with that one. This one takes a little bit more thought. And that is, what kind of patterns do you keep attracting? What kind of issues do you keep having with, you know, maybe a chain of partners, a chain of boyfriends, a chain of friendships, you know, your family, anything. In what area, if you really think about it, have you kind of had the same problems again and again? Maybe you've been dating the same kind of person. They're a different body, a different name, but it's the same fucking person. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's that, or maybe it's like your friendships keep ending in the exact same way. You know, a lot of the time when it comes to dating patterns, you know, dating the same types of people, having the same kinds of issues with your partners, it's sometimes a matter of you're trying to prove yourself in some way. Like this one does take more thought. This isn't an immediate thing. You do have to sit and reflect about your experiences. But a lot of the time I do think with dating patterns, it's if you keep having like the same negative experiences, it sometimes is a case of you're trying to prove something to yourself. And you know, our brain likes things that are familiar. It doesn't like to go out of its comfort zone. It likes to stick with the information that it knows. So you will end up dating the same kinds of people because that's familiar, and, you know, we all know this. But I think a lot of us, we have the same experiences and date the same kinds of people because we're wanting the result to change. We're wanting to prove that something isn't so. And that whatever that is going to be different for everyone, and that is going to be your childhood, like almost guaranteed. Again, takes a lot more thought. When you're getting into your childhood, it's never simple. Maybe it's daddy issues. It's something in that realm, if I had to put money on it, but I don't fucking know. I'm not a psychologist and I don't even know you. So like, fuck knows, but I'm just an educated guess. I would say there's something that you're kind of trying to prove. And again, it's something that you don't like about yourself. It's most likely something in your subconscious, something in your shadow self that you don't like and that you want it to be different, and that you, instead of facing that and kind of acknowledging it, welcoming it, trying to heal it and sort it out yourself, you're dating the same kinds of people, hoping that that's gonna sort something out, but it's just not. You know, for example, if something that you're kind of ashamed about yourself is maybe you think you're too intense. You just feel like you're too much, you're too intense. Like maybe someone's told you that in the past that you've dated. It's just like, you're fucking too much. You're like, that'll hurt. That will hurt. And then you keep dating people who inevitably, if you really thought about it, they're not compatible with you. Of course they're going to find you too much because it's not a good fit. And like for that person, maybe you would be too much. You're looking in the wrong places, it doesn't mean you are too much. You're just asking the wrong person. You're knocking on the wrong door. Do you know what I mean? If that's something that you feel ashamed of, you're more likely to, if you're denying it, keep going for the same people that are going to say the same shit because you're making bad choices and you're looking in the wrong places. Do you know what I mean? So I think for this one, a good thing to ask yourself is, what do you keep attracting? Because you're only going to attract what you've acknowledged. Does that make sense? You can only go so far when you're keeping all of this shit in the back of your mind and ignoring it. You can't really move beyond it until you start sorting that out a little bit, because it's like the law of attraction, we don't attract what we want, but we attract who we are. I think that's true. You don't really attract like what your goal is and what you want without kind of getting to that place a little bit yourself. Does this make sense? So yeah, looking back at your experiences, your patterns, what kind of situations do you keep getting yourself in? And sometimes it's not all going to be your fault, but sometimes, it takes two to tango. You'll be playing a role, and try and be really fucking honest with yourself. Like maybe you did date an idiot or something, but maybe if you really think about it, the way that you pursued this person was the same every single time. Do you know what I mean? There's certain things that, if you're really honest, there'll be parts that you've played, and I think sometimes they are a good indicator of what's going on, and where you're getting stuck, because it does feel like a stuck situation when it's like there's something there and it's being ignored. It's like you keep hitting the same wall. So I think that's a good one to think about as well. Okay, and the last one that I thought about is, what do you not like about other people? When you think about the people that you don't like, or the things you don't like about them, what are they? What do you find yourself being irritated by other people? What do you gossip about? If you really think about it, and you think about, generally it's like, again, it always is, but the people in your life that you're really close with, there's things about them that will bug you, whether it's your mum or your boyfriend or your dad or anyone that you're actually like, you have a close relationship with. These are usually the people that will trigger us the most because it's a vulnerable situation, whereas like a loose friend can't really cut that deep. Do you know what I mean? But when you think about it, when you in your head are being kind of critical, being kind of irritated, what areas is it usually about in the other people? Because the classic quote, what we criticize in others is what we despise about ourselves. The mirror effect. This is usually a good indicator. What makes you uncomfortable or annoyed, or what do you keep getting really hung up on when it's like, why do I care so much about this thing? It's probably because you can see yourself in it. There's a part of your shadow self, something you're denying. You can see someone else maybe not having that issue. That's sometimes what it is as well. Like, for example, if you're someone who has, say, like a really hard time saying sorry, like apologizing, admitting defeat, that's something that, a lot of us, like, again, ego, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. It takes work. But say that's like a weak spot of yours, like you have too much pride and you find that difficult. And say you're dating someone who doesn't have that issue at all, and they'll very quickly be like, I'm sorry, I take accountability, that's my fault. It's just not an area that's a weak spot for them. They're down to be like, I fucked up. Because again, remember, we all have weak spots. Just because that's not one of theirs doesn't mean that they don't have some that you're really good at. But this might actually grind your gears a little bit. Even though what they're doing is nice, it can get under your skin a little bit and bug you a little bit when there's something that you're not good at or that's a weak spot for you, and you can see someone else just being really good at it. It pisses you off. And this is something that we feel embarrassed and annoyed about, the fact that it annoys us. Because most of the time we know it's illogical and we know it's silly and we know it's our own fault and that someone else isn't doing anything. But that's kind of sometimes a weird little thing that we all do, is it's like we're not good at something, and it's almost like a jealousy thing. that we'll just like we have a little strife about the fact that someone else is like all good with that. Like it pisses us off. So that sometimes points towards like that's a weakness of yours that you're not acknowledging. But yeah, also just basic like, what do you gossip about? What bothers you in other people? Because sometimes people are just being annoying and like you're just gossiping. But sometimes we've seen ourselves in someone. We've seen something that we don't like, that makes us uncomfortable, that maybe scares us a little bit. And that's why we're fixating on it. Because it's almost like, why is it bothering you that much? If something's like kind of annoying, that's fine. But if it's really getting under your skin, maybe ask yourself why, because sometimes it's nothing to do with that person. A lot of the time it isn't. And I wrote down this quote that I saw that was relevant. If you hate a person, you hate something in him that is a part of yourself. What isn't part of ourselves does not disturb us, which is essentially what I'm saying. If someone has something that isn't like just doesn't trigger you at all, it's because it's irrelevant to you. You know, people will be annoying and it's none of your business. It will disturb you to your core if you see yourself in them. If you know this is something that you either, you know, are really shit at too and it's really getting to you, or something that they don't fucking have that problem. You know, it will come up if you see someone with the same fucking issue as you, it will trigger you. And if you see someone that doesn't have the issue that you have, that will also trigger you. Like, a lot of the time it's just, if it's really getting to you, just give it some thought. Because a lot of the time as well, gossip, when I'm talking about gossip and why do we gossip, you know, there's a few reasons. Part of it is just it's a way people connect. It's bonding in a shitty way. It is bonding. That's like the point of gossip. It's kind of like it feels like it brings us close. Obviously it's a shit thing to do, and you know, we should try not to gossip. When we do fall victim to being a bit of a gossip, it's probably because it seems like an opportunity to bond with someone that we want a relationship with of some sort. Do you know what I mean? But I think sometimes the things that we do gossip about, you know, like, oh my God, this person's done this, or did you see this person said this, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like the things we're most drawn to bitch about. It's because if we feel like we're bitching and gossiping about someone else having this issue, it's like we're ignoring the fact that we have the same fucking issue a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean? It's like our persona and our ego is trying to almost wear this mask of like perfection. Like, this is not a problem I have. Can you believe someone did this? This is crazy. When it's like, you probably did that last week and that's probably why you're bitching about it. Do you see what I mean? We're trying to convince ourselves that like that this isn't a thing that's triggering us, this isn't something we have an issue with. It's just wild that this person would like, you know, have this argument with their boyfriend and blah blah blah. And maybe the reason that you're fucking bringing that up is because you know that you've been really argumentative with your boyfriend and you're like, it's just toxic, it's so unhealthy, like she needs to leave him alone, like he's done nothing wrong, I don't understand. And it's like, you probably picked a fight with your boyfriend last night and you're feeling shitty about it. And instead of just acknowledging that, which is a bit uncomfortable because you're acknowledging that you fucked up, maybe, again, ego, it's easier to just shit on other people that are doing the same things. So a lot of the time, and I'm not saying that, like, I am victim of this too, we all fucking do this, I am no exception to this. Sometimes you're like talking about something in mid gossip or mid like sentence, you're like, you have a moment of like, fuck, I know why I'm doing this. Or like, fuck, I know why I've mentioned this. This is me. Oh my God. Sometimes, you know, we're not perfect. And as long as we're trying our best to be self-aware and grow, then like, it's okay. We're all gonna fuck up and like, you know, don't be too hard on yourself. But at the same time, you know, be self-aware. So that's another one. You know, what bugs you in other people often is something in yourself. It's disturbing you because it's triggering something that you don't like about yourself. Or what are you sitting around gossiping about? Because sometimes it's very coming from like an actual place, and you're having this lighthearted like conversation, but you're like trying to make yourself feel better about something almost any time that you're gossiping. Sometimes that's not the case, but sometimes it is, and you can tell when it's coming from a little bit of a more real place and when it's just like a lighthearted situation. Do you know what I mean? Not that I'm condoning gossiping. Gossiping is not a good habit to fall into. However, I'm just accepting the fact that we all fucking gossip occasionally. Like, I'm not gonna pretend that we don't all do that. So yeah, those are a few ways to discover, identify what's going on in your shadow self. And this is uncomfortable work. This is shadow work. Shadow work is not a fun area of self-improvement or therapy or whatever route you're taking to better yourself. This is one of the harder areas. Shadow work is not fun. However, it's an area that's fucking hard, but one you can actually see genuine, tangible improvements in. You know, it's not always like this massive result. A lot of self-care and self-love and working on yourself, it's like it's just loads of tiny adjustments. But I think shadow work, as much as it's shit, it's one that I don't think you get a tiny result. I think it can change your fucking life. It can change your relationships and your arguments and how triggered you are. It makes you feel more confident in yourself and you're not feeling so ashamed of shit. And like, it genuinely makes an obvious change in your life, I think is what I'm trying to say. So good luck. Good luck. Try not to be too hard on yourself. Realize that everyone has a fucking shadow self and no one's is like better or worse than the next person's. So, and you know, the fact that you're even trying to improve this is a sign that you give a shit, and that's already, you know, an amazing first step that you're actually caring. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week.